On October 14th, three friends turned on their camera to create a piece of content. They were looking for laughs, for views, for a moment of viral fame. But instead of capturing a prank, they captured evidence. They recorded their own worst nightmare. To understand what went wrong, you have to understand who they were. There was Alex, the charismatic ringleader, always chasing the next big idea. Ben, the skeptic, the voice of reason who usually went along with it. And Chloe, the camera operator, the documentarian who held the group together. Their channel was full of successful, harmless pranks. They were, in every way, a normal group of friends. The idea was a haunted gas station prank. The plan was for Chloe to fake a medical emergency at a remote, run-down gas station late at night. Alex and Ben, posing as strangers, would come to her aid. The goal was to capture the genuine reaction of a good Samaritan. They were so focused on the reaction of their mark, they never stopped to consider who, or what, else might be watching in the dark. At 11:47 p.m., a man named Tom pulled in for a pack of cigarettes. He was a mechanic, working the late shift. He was tired. He was the perfect, unsuspecting target. Or so they thought. Chloe began her fit near the dumpsters. Tom noticed. But he didn't react with confusion or panic. He reacted with intensity. He moved toward her with a strange, deliberate purpose. He didn't ask if she was okay. He knelt down, and his demeanor was not of a helper, but of an investigator. This is the moment the script was flipped. Alex and Ben, watching from the car, felt their first true pang of fear. The prank was no longer theirs to control. From their hidden mics, you can hear their whispered panic. Alex whispered, "Dude, what is he doing?" Ben replied, "This is wrong. We need to get her." Then Tom spoke to Chloe, his words caught by her hidden lapel mic. They were chillingly specific. "Who sent you? Are you one of them?" Tom pulled out a radio. "I've got a possible situation at the North Perimeter." In that moment, the terrifying truth dawned on them. This wasn't a random gas station. It was a front. A lookout. And they had just pranked a man who was guarding something he was willing to kill to protect. Chaos erupted. Headlights of other vehicles arrived. The friends tried to flee but found the exit blocked. The footage became a mess of shouting, blurred lights, and panic. They were dragged from their car. The cameras, some still hidden, one dropped on the ground, kept rolling. They were now the only witnesses to their own captivity. The investigation began not with a missing persons report, but with a cryptic online footprint. A scheduled upload, a missed live stream. It was their digital audience that first sounded the alarm. The police recovered the footage. The shocking truth was revealed: the gas station was a stash house for a major drug trafficking operation. Tom and his crew were armed guards. They were held for 36 hours, interrogated by men who believed their ridiculous story was a cover. In the end, it was the sheer, unedited absurdity of their prank that saved them. The footage proved their innocence. They were just stupid kids, not a threat. They were released, blindfolded and dumped on a roadside with a severe warning. They were psychologically shattered but physically alive. Their friendship did not survive the trauma. Alex struggles with severe anxiety. Ben moved to a different state. Chloe cannot bear to look at a camera. We live in a world where every moment can be content. The story of Alex, Ben, and Chloe is a dark parable for our times. It reminds us that the world is not a soundstage. That the people we encounter are not actors. And that sometimes, in the desperate search for a nightmare to film, we can stumble into a real one and become the star of a story we never wanted to tell. Be careful what you record. The story of Alex, Ben, and Chloe did not end on that desolate roadside. For them, the nightmare was over. But for the men who found the discarded cameras and the fractured digital breadcrumbs they left behind, the nightmare was just beginning. This is the story of the investigation their prank unintentionally triggered. The first officers on the scene, responding to the friend's frantic 911 call from a gas station 50 miles away, wrote it off as a drug-fueled hallucination. But the trauma in their eyes was real. And then there was the footage. Homicide detective Eva Rostova was called in as a courtesy. When she saw the raw video, she knew. This wasn't a bad trip. This was a crime scene. The initial challenge was location. The friends, blindfolded and in a state of shock, had no idea where they had been held. Rostova's first break came from a single, shaky frame in Chloe's dropped camera, a blurry reflection in a side-view mirror. It wasn't a landmark, but a faded, half-torn bumper sticker on a parked truck. Her team spent 72 hours cross-referencing satellite imagery and traffic camera data, looking for that specific sticker near any remote gas station. They found it. The Quick Stop 8 was now the center of a multi-agency task force. A quiet, tactical surveillance was established. But the Quick Stop 8 was a ghost. The pumps were dry. The lights were off. For 2 weeks, nothing moved. It was as if Tom and his crew had vanished into thin air, tipped off by the kid's release. The task force was losing momentum. Then, a forensic accountant working with the DEA found the thread. The property wasn't owned by an individual, but by a shell corporation, one of a web of nearly 24 LLCs, all linked to a single, seemingly legitimate property management firm based in a neighboring state. This wasn't a lone stash house, it was one node in a sophisticated network. Shutting down the Quick Stop 8 would be like cutting the head off a hydra, 2 more would grow back. The goal shifted. They needed to find the heart. The break came from an unexpected place, the audio of the original footage. While cleaning up the audio of Tom's radio transmission, a tech isolated a faint, almost imperceptible sound in the background, 3 short, metallic clangs, followed by a long, low horn. A train. And not just any train. Analysis of the sound profile pointed to a specific freight line, and the timing of the horn indicated it was the 12:15 a.m. northbound. By triangulating the distance of the horn and the train schedule, they pinpointed the location not just to the gas station, but to a specific radius where that sound would be audible. It confirmed their location, but more importantly, it revealed a pattern. Every one of the Shell Corporation's properties was within earshot of a major freight line. They weren't using trucks. They were using the railroad, moving product in sealed containers, with these remote outposts acting as logistical waypoints. The guards, like Tom, weren't just protecting a stash, they were overseeing the transfer of shipments from train to a distributed network of vehicles. The task force moved simultaneously on 6 locations, including the Quick Stop 8. The raid was a spectacle of controlled violence. At the Quick Stop, they found Tom, not with a handful of drugs, but with a laptop, an encrypted radio, and a ledger detailing shipment manifests. He was a logistics manager for a multi-state enterprise. The final takedown happened weeks later, far from the dusty roads of the original nightmare. The head of the network was arrested at his waterfront home, halfway across the country. He was a respected businessman, a philanthropist. He had never heard of Alex, Ben, or Chloe. Their terrifying ordeal was, to him, a minor logistical disruption, a single-line item in a vast and profitable operation. In the end, the system they stumbled upon was far larger and more chillingly efficient than anyone could have imagined. It was a machine that saw people as variables. The 3 friends were a glitch, a random variable that was identified, assessed, and discarded. But in their discarded state, they left behind a single, critical flaw in the code. A flaw that, when followed, led to the machine's eventual and silent collapse. The nightmare they recorded was their own. But the system they exposed was everyone's. Detective Eva Rostova stood in the evidence room, staring at the wall of connections. The name at the center, Alastair Finch, the head of the network, was untouchable. Philanthropist, CEO of Viridian Futures, and friend to senators and police commissioners. Directly investigating him would be career suicide, her case would be buried, and she'd be reassigned to desk duty before she could say, obstruction of justice. The challenge wasn't finding evidence, it was that the evidence died before it could breathe. The system was his armor. The twist came not from a smoking gun, but from a seemingly irrelevant detail in Tom's financials. While reviewing the armed guard's bank statements for the umpteenth time, she noticed a tiny, recurring monthly donation, $25 to the Ethelred Foundation, an obscure historical preservation society. It was odd. Tom wasn't the donating type, and certainly not to a society dedicated to preserving medieval manuscripts. A search revealed the foundation was a pet project of Alastair Finch himself, a tax-deductible hobby for his love of antiquities. In any case, the amount was seemingly insignificant to trigger any suspicion, but therein lay Rostova's knack for deciphering the not-so-obvious and, I must say, Alastair Finch's criminal genius. Most would have dismissed it. But not Rostova. Remembering Finch's notorious, almost fetishistic obsession with the past, she saw a thread. She requested the files for the Ethelred Foundation, framing it as a routine financial check on a person of interest, knowing Finch's accountants would see the request and dismiss it as police incompetence, looking at his charity while his empire thrived. The Foundation's records were pristine, boring even. But then she found the digital equivalent of a palimpsest, a hidden layer beneath the clean surface. A junior forensic accountant on her team, working off the books, discovered that the Foundation's server intermittently hosted a secondary, encrypted server. This secondary server only activated during specific, preset, donation drives. The login credentials weren't based on passwords, but on answers to obscure historical questions about the very manuscripts the Foundation claimed to protect. Rostova had found his vanity. Finch, a man who thought himself a modern-day Medici, hadn't used complex, soulless code. He'd used his knowledge as the key. The entire shadow network, the inventory of stash houses, shipment schedules, payroll for men like Tom, and, most importantly, the ledger of bribes to officials, was hidden on a server masquerading as a digital archive for 14th-century monastic ledgers. He hadn't trusted the cloud or his lieutenants. He'd trusted his own intellect and his love for a bygone era. The system was a civias for his sins, a hidden book only he could truly read, because he was the only one who understood the ancient language. Rostova couldn't arrest him. Not yet. But she could become a scholar. She enlisted a disgraced, brilliant professor of medieval history from the local university, a man facing charges for plagiarizing a paper on precisely this era. She offered him a deal, his expertise for a clean slate. The professor, armed with Finch's public speeches and writings, deduced the answers. The first question: in which city did the council that condemned the Knights Templar initially convene? The answer wasn't in the official records, but in a fringe theory Finch had once passionately endorsed in a magazine interview: Poitiers. The server unlocked. They didn't download everything at once. That would trigger alarms. Instead, like patient monks, they spent weeks silently photographing the digital records. They compiled the entire map of the operation, but more critically, they secured the ledger, a meticulous record of every payment, every favor, to every government official and high-net-worth individual who provided cover. Eva now possessed the keys to the kingdom. As a seasoned detective, she knew a direct assault would lead to a war she could not win through conventional means. So, she engineered a collapse from within. She began with the lowest hanging fruit, a mid-level city planner who had approved zoning permits for the stash houses. She presented him with irrefutable evidence of his bribery, but instead of arresting him, she gave him a choice: become a confidential informant and use his access to feed her information on the next person up the chain, or face immediate, humiliating prosecution. He folded. She repeated this process, climbing the ladder one rung at a time. Each person she flipped was given the same choice: cooperation and a chance at a mitigated sentence, or ruin. The pressure was applied silently, away from Finch's gaze. He saw his empire not under attack, but seemingly suffering from a bizarre plague of incompetence and bad luck. Shipments were intercepted based on anonymous tips, stash houses were raided due to unrelated patrols, his guards were arrested on perfectly legitimate, but minor, charges. The final masterstroke was turning Finch's most crucial protector, the deputy police commissioner. When presented with the evidence of his own corruption, neatly catalogued in Finch's own ledger, the commissioner realized the detective wasn't just holding his career in her hands, but his freedom. He had a choice: be the one to lead the triumphant arrest of a major criminal, salvaging his reputation, or be exposed as the corrupt lackey he was. On the day of the raid, it was the deputy commissioner himself who stood beside Eva, a phalanx of federal agents behind them, as they entered the hallowed halls of Viridian Futures. Alastair Finch was in his office, admiring a newly acquired illuminated manuscript. He looked up, not at his enemy, but at his betrayed protector. The shock on his face was absolute. His immunity, built on mutual assured destruction, had been dismantled by the very weapon he had created: his own arrogant, meticulous record-keeping. Detective Rostova had brought down a king not by breaking down his castle walls, but by patiently learning the secret passageways he had built for himself, and by turning his own knights against him. She proved that the highest walls can be scaled from the inside. Quite a story, wouldn't you agree? Well, I wouldn't be mentioning any lessons from this story, so if you found this story intriguing, kindly share in the comments section what intrigued you. As always, remember to give this story a thumbs up, to also click the bell notification button, and most definitely subscribe to this channel so you'll be notified as soon as the next story drops. Thanks for joining me on this one. More stories coming your way.